Welcome to episode 9 of the Bordertraveller Podcast. Today we are tackling one of the most significant and closely watched policy trends currently sweeping across the European Union, the 28th regime. This groundbreaking proposal is designed to solve the bloc's long-standing challenges with economics fragmentation and global competitiveness. The core idea is to create a single, optional, pan-European legal framework that would allow businesses, especially startups and scaled-ups, to operate across the entire single market under one set of rules. Essentially, it would function as a 28th system alongside the 27th existing national legal systems, aiming to drastically reduce the complexity and cost for companies trying to scale across multiple EU countries. It's an ambitious plan intended to make the entire EU a true home market. Take it away, guys.
Imagine this for a second. You're a founder, say, in Stockholm. You've built this amazing AI health tech solution. You're ready to scale up, take on Europe. But that dream, right now, it means hitting the bureaucratic wall. 27 different sets of laws for everything, structure, funding, hiring, tax. It just slows everything down. Costs money, costs time.
Yeah, it's a huge drag on innovation.
Okay, let's unpack this deep fragmentation.
Yeah.
You could argue it's the EU's biggest single weakness compared to, the US or China.
Absolutely.
And that problem is exactly why there's so much buzz, maybe controversy too, around this huge proposed legislation. The 28th regime.
You called it a bureaucratic wall, but it's almost existential, isn't it? The EU's economic power is genuinely hampered because its own successful companies just can't scale easily across borders.
Bro.
And this proposed regime, it's the direct policy answer coming out of those big strategic reports everyone's talking about. Letta, Draghi, they both basically said, look, only something radical, something market-wide is going to fix this.
So that's the context.
Exactly. So our mission in this deep dive is to really get into the mechanics of this proposed 28th system. We need to figure out how it's supposed to give founders, a shortcut through all that red tape. Understand the potential upside. It could be huge for investment, for talent, and maybe most importantly, look hard at the obstacles, the really tough political challenges to actually making it happen, getting everyone on board.
Okay, let's start with the basics then. Companies can already set up in Germany or Ireland or wherever. Why do we need another option? What actually is this 28th regime?
So it's designed as a pan-European legal framework, right? But crucially, it's optional.
Optional. Right?
It's like a parallel track. So instead of setting up under, say, French corporate law, a company could choose to be a purely European entity. And the key thing is, it would be governed by just one single set of EU rules.
So the whole block becomes your home market from day one.
That's the idea, yes.
But making it optional, that still sounds complex. How do you make sure this optional system actually overrides all the national complications? What's the legal tool they're trying to use?
Well, that's where it gets tricky politically. They're proposing to create it using an EU regulation.
Regulation. And why is that so significant and such a headache?
Because unlike a directive which just sets goals and lets each country figure out how to write it into their own laws.
Which always leads to 27 different versions.
Exactly. A regulation is different. It's direct EU law. It applies immediately everywhere, bypassing national parliaments. So if this 28th regime is going to offer real simplification and certainty, it has to be a regulation.
But that means?
It means you need every single member state to agree. Unanimity. And that's why the political barrier is just incredibly high.
Right. So the goal isn't just less paperwork. It's more fundamental. Changing the whole mindset, maybe. Getting rid of that massive cost and complexity for any startup or SME just trying to operate across a border.
Precisely. Think back to that Stockholm founder. Right now, operating in, say, Germany, France, and Poland means juggling 3 different rule books for almost everything.
Yeah.
The 28th regime offers an alternative path, opt-in, and you get one standard, hopefully transparent, digital-first system for your incorporation, your funding rounds, managing your employees.
So it's about finally delivering on the promise of the single market, making it so that founder incorporates once and can treat all 27 countries like Delaware treats the 50 U.S. states.
That's the ambition, absolutely. A true home market.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for me, the impact on innovation. If this is really aimed at boosting the tech scene, how does it actually help attract venture capital?
Well, it offers clarity. And for an investor, clarity is almost as good as cash.
Ah, right.
Think about it from an international VC's perspective. Investing in Europe now often means costly, slow legal checks in multiple countries. It's a barrier.
Yeah.
But if a startup operates under one standard, predictable European legal framework, poof, a lot of that cost and risk just disappears. The structure is clear.
And I saw the proposals get really specific, down to standardizing actual investment documents like something called EU Fast. What's that about? Why is standardizing a single document such a big deal in Europe?
The EU Fast. It stands for Future Agreement for Shares and Transactions. Basically, it's a standard template for convertible notes.
Okay.
And this tackles a really deep-seated issue in many European legal systems, particularly those based on civil law. U.S. startups use convertible notes all the time. They're fast, flexible, they put off the tricky valuation chat until later.
Right, standard Silicon Valley practice.
But many European legal traditions, they really struggle with these slightly fuzzy concepts of future equity. National laws often demand very clear definitions of capital right up front. It's based on centuries of tradition. So the EU Fast aims to be a legally blessed template. It gives investors confidence that their future equity agreement will actually convert into shares later, sidestepping that traditional legal skepticism. It could seriously speed up early-stage funding.
Wow. Okay, that's actually a really crucial technical point. It's not just about efficiency. It's like a translation tool for legal concepts that don't naturally fit some national system.
Exactly.
But funding's only one side of the coin. Startups desperately need talent. How does the 28th regime tackle the war for talent?
The big focus here is on creating a harmonized EU employee share option pool, an ESOP.
ESOPs.
This goes straight at maybe the single biggest disadvantage European startups face competing with Silicon Valley: equity compensation. The goal is to kill off the problem of dry taxation.
Okay, for anyone listening who hasn't run into that nightmare, what is dry taxation? Why is it so damaging?
Dry taxation is when an employee gets taxed on the value of their stock options when they're granted, or when they vest, basically, long before they can actually sell them and get cash.
So they have a tax bill,
Yeah.
but no money to pay it.
Exactly. They have to pay tax out of pocket on theoretical gains. For startup employees who are usually cash poor, that's just financially crippling.
Yeah, it kills the incentive.
Totally. So a harmonized ESOP system under the 28th regime would aim to ensure that employees are only taxed when they actually sell their shares and make money. That would finally let EU startups offer equity packages that can genuinely compete with U.S. offers, helping keep top talent in Europe.
Okay, so we're talking potentially faster incorporation, smoother funding with things like EU Fast, and better talent tools with harmonized ESOPs. It sounds like stripping out a lot of friction right at the start.
That's the goal. And the digital-first aspect is key, too. The idea is founders could potentially incorporate entirely online, maybe in just 48 hours. Compare that to weeks or months and multiple visits to notaries now. It's meant to be radically simpler.
Right. Okay, let's shift from startups specifically to just general business operations. Once a company is set up quickly, how does this help them stay agile as they grow? You mentioned the once-only principle.
Yes, the once-only principle. This is aimed squarely at reducing the ongoing administrative burden.
How does it work?
It means a business should only have to submit its core information, ownership, structure, that sort of thing, to one central EU registry. That info is then supposed to be reliably shared across all member states whenever it's needed.
Okay, I can see how that helps.
It could dramatically streamline what they call cross-border mobility. Imagine moving your company headquarters from, say, Milan to Amsterdam.
Yeah.
Or just opening a branch office in Vilnius. Right now, that can sometimes mean legally dissolving the old entity and reincorporating under the new country's rules. A huge hassle. This aims to avoid that.
And there seems to be this other, maybe softer benefit. Like operating under this EU legal status gives you a kind of stamp of quality.
I think that's a really important psychological and ultimately financial benefit.
Yes.
Having a recognized EU legal status signals instant credibility. It tells investors, suppliers, customers worldwide that this company meets a certain unified, standard European baseline for governance and transparency. It builds trust and provides legal certainty.
Okay, connecting this back to the really big picture stuff.
Yeah.
This whole initiative, It's clearly not just about making life easier for businesses, right? It ties directly into the EU's major strategic goals for the future.
Oh, absolutely. Goal number 1, global competitiveness. The EU is tired of watching its fastest-growing companies eventually move their HQs or list their stock in New York.
Right, they want homegrown giants.
Exactly. Foster its own tech champions, reduce that reliance on innovation coming from elsewhere.
And goal 2 is presumably jobs, economic resilience.
Definitely. A more dynamic startup and SME sector, freed from some of these burdens, is seen as the best engine for creating high-quality, sustainable jobs.
Makes sense.
And finally, it connects to the twin transitions, green and digital. The EU has these massive ambitions for decarbonization and digital transformation, but achieving those requires huge amounts of innovation, fast. The 28th regime is seen as the legal framework, the chassis, if you like, needed to quickly fund and scale up the very companies that are expected to drive those transitions.
Okay, so the potential benefits are clearly enormous. The momentum seems strong. But we have to do the reality check now. Implementing something this sweeping across 27 different countries, sounds incredibly difficult. What are the big obstacles?
Well, the elephant in the room, the single biggest hurdle, is political unanimity.
We touched on this with the regulation aspect.
Exactly. Because it has to be a regulation to work properly, you need all 27 member states to say yes. Every single one has a veto. Which means the odds of a smooth, easy passage are, frankly, tiny. It's a massive political lift.
Are people talking about ways around that?
They are. You hear a lot of talk about a multi-speed Europe approach. Maybe a core group of countries that are really keen on market unification could go ahead first.
And leave the door open for others to join later.
Right. But even that kind of approach has risks. It could create new divisions, new complexities within the single market itself. It's not a simple fix.
Okay, so politics is hurdle number 1. But even if you got the political will, the legal complexity sounds staggering. National laws are just so different, so deeply rooted. Where are the biggest clashes?
Oh, the legal traditions run incredibly deep. But probably one of the absolute thorniest issues is co-determination.
Co-determination. Explain that.
So it's the legal right for workers to have representation, sometimes significant representation, on the management boards or supervisory boards of larger companies.
Ah, right, like in Germany.
Germany is the prime example, yes. They have very strict, long-standing models mandating significant worker input. It reflects a deep cultural belief in stakeholder capitalism, not just shareholder value.
And how does that clash with a unified EU regime?
Well, how do you create one system that satisfies that strong German model, but is also flexible enough for, say, a Polish startup or a company from a country with almost no tradition of worker representation on boards?
I see the problem.
The moment you try to create a flexible EU standard, countries like Germany worry their protections are being diluted. But if you make it too rigid, it doesn't work for others. Finding a compromise there is, well, it's incredibly difficult technically and politically.
And that friction feeds directly into another big fear, doesn't it? The race to the bottom argument.
Exactly.
The idea that this optional EU system will just become a way for companies to shop around for the weakest rules.
That's the core concern voiced by countries with traditionally high standards, high taxes, strong worker protections like Germany, France, the Nordics perhaps. They worry the 28th regime could become a kind of European Delaware.
A Delaware effect, where everyone incorporates where the rules are most lenient.
Precisely. A framework optimized for maybe minimal worker rights, maybe favorable tax treatment, allowing companies to sidestep stronger national standards.
But what's the counterargument to that? Doesn't the current complexity already push companies away?
That's exactly the view from the pro-regime camp. They'd say the current mess is already a race to the bottom or maybe a race out of Europe.
How so?
Because the complexity is so bad, it's pushing Europe's best scale-ups to incorporate in the U.S. or list on NASDAQ anyway. They're effectively exporting the jobs, the taxes, the IP already. So from that perspective, having a streamlined European option, even if it's maybe not as strict as the toughest national rules, is vital just to keep that innovation and capital in Europe.
A difficult trade-off. And finally, there's this debate about who should even be allowed to use this regime. Does it risk creating new bureaucracy?
Yeah, the eligibility question. Should it be open to any company, big or small, old or new, or should it be narrowly targeted, say, only at innovative or high-growth firms?
What are the implications?
Well, the proponents want it broad to maximize the market impact. But there's huge political pressure, especially from those worried about the race to the bottom, to limit it, to justify these special streamlined rules only for certain types of companies. But then you hit the obvious problem. How on earth do you define innovative or high growth in a legally sound, non-arbitrary way that works across 27 countries?
Right. If you have to limit it, you probably need some new EU body to decide who qualifies.
Which instantly creates more bureaucracy and delay, completely undermining the whole point of simplification and speed.
Right.
It could defeat the entire purpose.
So pulling this all together, what does it mean for you listening to this and for the future of how business gets done in Europe? This 28th regime, it feels like a really high-stakes gamble, a high-wire act.
And absolutely.
It could genuinely transform the continent, finally unlock the full potential of the single market, maybe create those European tech giants, keep top talent here.
That's the dream scenario, yes. But on the other hand, if the political compromises needed to get it passed on things like co-determination, tax, eligibility, if those compromises water it down too much,
Then what?
then it risks just becoming another layer of complexity on top of the 27 national systems. Or, maybe worse, it could actually deepen inequalities if it does become a loophole for regulatory avoidance. Despite those risks, though, the underlying political feeling seems to be that the EU has to try something this bold, that fixing the structural deficit is essential for its global standing.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you to mull over. Given the sheer complexity we've discussed, and that absolute need for political unanimity, is creating something potentially less protective, something that might feel like a European Delaware. Is that fear the fatal flaw? Or is it actually the necessary, maybe uncomfortable trade-off Europe has to make to achieve the scale and competitiveness it desperately needs on the world stage? What do you think?